What's up everybody, this is Mattia, and today I'll try to keep this review as short as possible. I know I regularly do like 30 to 35 minutes reviews. This time, I'll try something different. I'll restrain myself from explaining to the smallest little hair on the egg thing, but at the same time, I'm trying to please as most of you as possible, because some people do enjoy the longer format, but most prefer like the 10 minutes reviews for 40 minutes, 15 minutes, 16 minutes at max, but not more than that. I myself like more longer reviews, but I know that is not the trend. So, I'm not going to explain you the unit variation thing. I'm not going to explain you that you have to do the mod. I'm going to leave a link below on how to do the mod, but I think you do already know that these do come with a shit cable and you have to change it. You have to be prepared to do like the MMCX mod. You have to drill the housing, attach the driver to the cable, and buy a new cable. Look, that is all explained on the link below, in the link below. I'm going to start with talking about the build. The build is cheap plastic. There are like two sides meshed together. I don't know if you can see it. Sorry for the shit lighting. See, here you go. I think you can see the split. I hope you can see the split. Yeah, there. It's kind of visible. Yeah, and one side contains the protrusion from the actual cable, and the other, the smaller one, contains the actual driver. It's a single 9mm driver, and these cost like $4 on AliExpress, but not all the time. And let me explain that in just a second. Some people do sell these on eBay at higher prices, but the mod is already done on them. The problem is that they cost like $30, and I will not possibly prefer to invest that kind of money when I can get the mod myself done and the new cable, for $15 complete. So it's a bit of a hassle. If you really just want to buy the earpieces on eBay, you can find the original MH755. Just you are sure that those are the original ones, and at that price, they better be. That are like sold in batches with the MMCX connector. So, build is kinda meh. The cable is absolute horse crap shit. It's the worst thing in the entire universe. It's as useless as canned bread. It doesn't have a function in the existence at all. Yeah, sound. How did this fare with the KZ EDX? How do these compare one to another? We are going to get to that in the review, but first, I'm going to describe the general sound signature and the tonality of these, which is the most impressive part of the general sound. Technicalities are decent, we're going to get into that later, but tonality is what really like impressed me. It's a severe U shape with lots of sub bass and a pronounced treble. It's not the upper treble, it's the lower treble, which doesn't bother me much because I'm not sensitive to that kind of region. I'm much more sensitive to the upper mid-range, and these do have a kind of a hole in the midst. Like I was talking about the mega U shape. If you look at the frequency response on these, they are really U-shaped, and some might call them V-shaped, but the transition from the sub bass to the upper mid-range, the upper mid-range doesn't have as much of a lift as the lower treble, and the lower treble is at the one end of the spectrum when you like compare it to the upper mid-ranges. So a U-shape describes something that is more of a contoured frequency response instead of a peak, a valley, and another peak at one side or one another, and it might be this kind of V shape, this kind of V shape, this kind of V shape, or this kind of V shape. But at that point, when the frequency response gets so broad in the lowering of it, in the like scoop, that gets more of a U shape. If you find a frequency response that goes in this direction instead of lowering down from a peak, going down and climbing up, that's a more of a V shape. But I characterize these as a softer and up, like lower treble enhanced sound, and very, 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 very warm and sub bass oriented for the rest of the spectrum. So the mid range does take a hit, but in terms of timbre, in terms of just an encompassing and emotional sound, these do get it right. And these do get it right more than in Bonus IE, more than the KZ-EDX. And just ending with digital tonality, I'd also describe the upper treble as a gentler treble. That kind of goes with the general sound of these. So, technicalities. Well, let's start with detail retrieval, imaging, and soundstage. Not the greatest, especially the detail retrieval and the imaging. These are a step below from the KZ-EDX. They are got tangled. And they are a step below from the KZ-EDX, a noticeable step below. And the imaging is a little bit more blurry than the KZ-EDX. Though, I'd say that the center imaging, being a bit more diffuse than the EDX, does give a bit more, like, it does encompass more of a smoother and more fun sound than the KZ-EDX. The KZ-EDX is already a very fun sounding IM. These shit on those in terms of enjoyment. Not joking. But in technicalities, I will say it is kind of a reverse situation. Imaging is a little bit blurry. It does get better when you move into the sides, and the center imaging is not defined. Instruments tend to get lost and mixed up a bit when, like, in an L and R fashion, so you don't have a particularly forward or deep sound that might be characterized by a good center image like the HD 600s. So the MH755s does get back up in terms of soundstage. Now, there's a bit of an interesting thing with the insertion on these. If you insert them very, very deep into your ear canal and you make like the shells almost disappear inside your ear, just like that, I'm gonna go in and make you see how you do it. See, it's almost like going all the way in there, just leaves this tiny beats outside. If I decide to pull them slightly, just like this, and decide to not create a vacuum seal, because these do seal when fitted more in a more shallow fashion, but when you insert them deeply, you get definitely more isolation, but a neutral sound, what I will call a neutral sound. However, it sounds damped. It sounds boring, it sounds lackluster and lifeless. And when you pull them out slightly, all things open up. The sub bass gets the right amount of impact that is corresponding to the frequency response, which is a lot of sub bass, a lot of creamy, smooth, deep, rumbling sub bass that unfortunately does bleed into the mid range and even the treble if the track does have an enhanced sub bass sound in it. But on those songs like rock that don't present a particularly forward amount of sub bass, these can make the song sound fuller, warmer, more. Uh, I just call it fuller. It does sound less clean because of that sub bass lift, that extreme sub bass lift. But at the same time, and it does mask out some details. But at the same time, it sounds fun. Fun. These are a bass head dream, more so than the KZ EDX. And because also, I will define the mid bass as very forceful and impactful. Like these, the KZ EDX, they do not have an especially impactful sub bass, especially impactful mid bass, sorry, but the sub bass is present. These not only have a very, very elevated sub bass, more so than those, but the mid bass does provide a better punch and a better slam to like kick drums or bongos. When I was listening to the song of Michael 5, what it was called? I want you back. I want you back. I think it's called I want you back. I'm having like a hole in my memory right now, and that song with the bongos made me cry on these. And I recall the first time I put them on, I had the song playing around, and I was listening to, I think, these shows and Neo CPs. I put these on, and then I go, holy shit, are those for real? And bongos had such a natural timbre to them, and the vocalist Michael had such a natural, like, it was there. He was there. He was there. Now, because voices are not gigantic and not presented in a especially big way like the KZ EDX tend to do, they do sound more natural. They do sound more like real life. They are not blown into your face like the KZ EDX tend to do, especially with choruses. The MH755 is a very like, as far as timbre goes, is a very, very good earphones. Sorry, I get myself lost. I was talking about the insertion. If you pull them out just slightly, the sub bass does open up, the treble gets back, and you get a much more vivid, forceful, impactful, and much more fun sound. You actually start to enjoy it. And I discovered that, unfortunately, to get that kind of special spots, I had to fiddle them around a bit. And after some time, I had to do it again, because the ear tips, despite being amazing, I love these ear tips. They're super spongy. And despite the amazing ear tips and this is the right like dimension for my ear canals, they tend to slip out from my ears just because they don't have, they do not have an ergonomic shape. They're a bullet. I would almost call them a canister, like one of those beer canisters. I don't know. It's a cone, almost like a cone that has been cut off on the top. And yeah, the fit is super comfortable, but otherwise, fit is finicky, a bit finicky. Yeah. Other things, yeah, timbre, I've already described it. Mid-range does have a smooth, natural character, more natural than the Bonus IE, much more natural than the KZ EDX. The KZ EDX, in comparison, does sound colder, and that just might be a result of the KZ EDX just sounding cleaner and more defined. The EDX is actually smoother in the treble response. The MH755s can just get fatiguing after a while. They're not a ultra smooth set just in the treble sections, because in the mid range they're ultra buttery smooth, full, and vocals have this grandness, but it's more of an emotional contact than an actual physical bigness. The mid range, despite being a bit encompassed by the sub bass and the upper treble, it's actually given vocals a lot of space to breathe. They sound great. Despite the sub bass tokening in some songs and overwhelming the rest of the frequency response, vocals do stay mostly intact. And for vocal lovers, you're gonna like these definitely more than the KZEDX. The KZEDX, on the other hand, does have thinner and colder mid-range while retaining a better amount of detail, not having the same great timbre as these do, despite the ADX sounding relatively natural. The MH755, though, are much more natural in terms of timbre, not quite as natural as the R2XRs, but the R2XRs are absurd. They're almost like real life thing. Like, ooh, man. And getting back to the KZEX comparison, the KZEX does have better technicalities, does have better clarity, detail, and smoother treble, slightly more extended upper treble, a less pronounced sub bass lift, a tighter, more and just slightly less impactful bass, and definitely less impactful mid bass, and generally a wider soundstage with more defined imaging. Albeit the center imaging is not quite really as defined, and like from the Sony, when you go from the Sony MH755 to the KZEDX sound immediately more open and with more soundstage and a clearer center imaging. However, you start to listen to the KZEDX for like after 5 minutes, 7 minutes, you start to miss some of that natural tonality from the MH755. So what I can say in conclusion. One last things. These do sound kind of realistic. However, they do not have the clarity nor the detail retrieval to back it up. So they sort of sound less realistic in a way than the EDX, but much more so in terms of just clarity than timbre. Because if you just listen to timbre and the decay and the natural decay of notes, the MH755 got the KZEDX beat. The KZEDX does sound faster and more snappy in terms of transients, does have a faster decay. However, that does make them less natural and definitely colder and less warmer than the Sony MH755. So, dynamics are not really great on both. There's not much dynamics to speak of. The Sony MH755 tends to sound more in your face, where the KDX tends to just spread out things a bit more and doesn't have quite the same forcefulness and quite the same emotional attachment to the music as the Sony MH755. So, in conclusion, I really do like these. I do prefer them for the tonality than the KZEDX. I do prefer them to these, but the KZEDX is a noticeable step up in terms of overall technicalities, and I'd say that the EDX fit is better and more akin to just you put these on, you didn't have to be bothered by the fit. These are a bit more finicky. I will call them just a bit more comfortable, and the dimensions are the dimension differences are it's evident. Look at that. These are like a standard IM form. These are thing go into your ear. Tube go in ear. Capito? Okay. Beh, dunque, questo è tutto per coloro italiani che stanno ascoltando. So, this is it. I'm calling these an amazing set. I do prefer them overall to the KZ EDX, but I do find that maybe most people are going to find this step up in technicalities of the KZDX more pleasing than the overall warmer, fluffier, and timbrally more correct sound of the MH755. So, that's about it. 20 minutes and 37. Shit. Well, that's about it. I'm going to end it now. See you in the next time.